Hello, this is Hart Hagen. I would like to share with you an article from the New York Times and comment on it. We're going to talk about concentrated animal feeding operations, otherwise known as factory farms. What is the problem with them and what are some of the solutions? We are going to talk about an opinion piece from the New York Times from today, I assume. And let's get into it. I'm going to share my handy dandy screen with you here. See if I can click the right button. There we go. It says this is why our rivers are turning into sewers. And the author is one Mr. Michael Grunwald, who is a contributing opinion writer to the New York Times. Now, I'm going to show you this slide now and at the end. This is my summary of my response. This is going to take about 20 minutes. The problem is pollution in our rivers. Everybody agrees on that. His solution is more regulation such that farms, including factory farms, are not allowed to get away with pollution that would be impermissible if they were other types of factories. Not a bad approach, but I think it doesn't get at the root of the problem. Number three, what's the problem with his solution? It leaves the system in place. It leaves in place the system that created the problems to begin with. And item 3B, it does not get to the root of the problem. 4, what is the root problem? The root problem is the question of who is in charge. Who gets to make these decisions? Is it you and me? Do we get to make the decisions as eaters, consumers? If we live near a farm, do we get to participate in the decision-making process as to what is and is not permissible on that farm or not? I submit to you that the root of the problem is that we, the people, do not have the authority to make these decisions. That authority has been taken from us. The root problem, who is in charge? We have foreign-owned meat packers. JBS is a Brazilian company. Smithfield is a Chinese company. The big companies, including foreign-owned companies, have a lot of influence in our system. And they're also monopolies. The big meat packers are like, what, 4 companies if you add them all up? And then another problem, 4C, is that federal regulation eliminates competition. Federal regulation should facilitate competition, should allow for competition, should engender competition. Instead, what we have is the federal government has a monopoly on the regulation of food. There is no reason for the federal government to have a monopoly on the regulation of food. That's why I say item 5, the real solution is freedom and what's called food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is when we get to make the choices as to how our food is produced and where. Item 6, generally speaking, stop the theft. Stop the theft of our land, our health, our freedom, and our choice. So let's go on to the next slide. Reading from the article, American factory farms generate nearly 1 trillion pounds of manure every year, and way too much of it ends up in rivers, lakes, and estuaries. Animal waste is a major reason half of Americans' water bodies are too dirty for fishing or swimming. It's the most persistent driver of destructive algal blooms in beloved waterways, such as Lake Erie and the Chesapeake Bay, which both just fell far short of their 2025 water quality targets. I would also say that chemical fertilizers having nothing to do with animal agriculture, with factory farms, are a major cause of algal blooms, and it would be helpful to not separate those two. It's a major cause of water pollution and algal blooms. It's a dirty, smelly, sickening mess. The cause is simple. Unlike factories, most factory farms aren't legally responsible for their pollution. Unlike human poop, animal poop is legally required to be treated before it is released into the environment. America's concentrated animal feeding operations, the industrial livestock farms known as CAFOs, produce twice as much waste as America's toilets, but nobody is tracking where or how it gets flushed. So this author wants to say, let's recap so far. This author wants to say that the solution to this is more regulation. I'm not opposed to regulation. I just think that regulation in this case is not going to get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is big, powerful people and companies get to decide what the laws are. That's part of the problem. Another part of the problem is people don't have the choice because the federal government has a monopoly on USDA regulation. And if you want to buy meat, you have to buy meat that is subject to USDA regulation. What we could do is have the Prime Act, for example. The Prime Act has been introduced by Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, and he says the Prime Act, in essence, is that if food is grown and sold in your state, then the federal government does not have the authority to regulate that. Now, if it were true, if the Prime Act were enacted, and if it were true that that the federal government doesn't have authority to regulate that which is grown and sold in your state, would that not introduce competition? Would there not be more local farms? More people would choose to buy from local farms, and farmers could make more of a living because they wouldn't be restricted to selling their product only to these huge meat packers that thrive on the monopoly that the federal government has. Let's go back to our handy dandy slideshow. Now, continuing to read the article, so CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, keep getting bigger, even though they are wildly unpopular. Polls from the ASPCA suggested that 89% of Americans are concerned about factory farms and 74% want to ban new ones. The critics include right-wing natural food advocates as well as left-wing environmentalists and animal rights activists. The podcaster Joe Rogan has said that factory farming should be illegal. There's an important point here, and that is that there are more of us than there are of them. We should want to reach across party lines on any number of issues. People agree on a couple of dozen major issues, and if we're not so hung up on Democrat or Republican, if we're willing to reach across party lines and work with people who agree with us on important issues, then it would be an entirely different world. Frederick Douglass, the famed former slave and abolitionist from the 1800s, said, "I will work with anybody to do right and nobody to do wrong." The problem is these major political parties reverse that. They will work with anybody to do wrong and with nobody to do right. They've made us allergic to reaching across party lines. Famous comedian, what's his name? George Carlin said that when you hear the word bipartisan, somebody's going to get it done to them. These two parties, they work on a bipartisan basis to screw the people. And that's the way I see it. That might sound harsh, but if we had rule of the people, by the people, for the people, it would be a different world. Let's continue reading. But what it's saying here is that the critics of concentrated animal feeding operations come from the left wing, the right wing, and everything in between. Environmentalists, right wing natural food advocates, etc. So this author is going to say, I don't actually believe that. In other words, I don't actually believe that factory farming should be illegal. He says that, like it or not, 99% of US meat now comes from factory farms. Okay, be careful when be careful what you accept as inevitable. Just because currently 99% of US meat now comes from factory farms does not mean that it has to be that way. So he acts like if you get rid of, yes, you don't want to do anything too suddenly, but we could phase them out over a period of a couple of years. We could subsidize people who uh, have trouble if food prices go up. We can do something like SNAP benefits for that. But he says, so it doesn't have to be a sudden thing or a shocking thing, all of which it's like if we, the people, were in charge, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But he says banning them would send production to much less efficient operation. Efficient in what way? Efficient, efficiency is not a standalone concept. Efficient at doing what? Efficient at sending profits to multinational corporations and billionaires. Our system is currently efficient at sending profits to multinational corporations and billionaires. Our system is currently efficient at weeding out the competition. So that's not the type of efficiency we want. So he says banning them would send production to much less efficient operations that would require much more land, deforestation, and carbon emissions. This guy just doesn't get it. Deforestation does not have to occur as a result of livestock operations. It just depends. Deforestation occurs because of, for example, cattle that are not 100% grass fed. Deforestation occurs as much as anything because of animal feed. Anyway, he's lumping a lot of issues together. There are a lot to unpack here. He says banning them would send production to much less efficient operations that would require much more land, deforestation, and carbon emissions. Livestock does not have to produce carbon emissions. That's another conversation. To produce our steaks, bacon, and chicken breasts. Okay, steaks, bacon, and chicken breasts. Cattle, pigs, chickens. Those are three different things. I'm concerned about the animal welfare as it concerns pigs and chickens. Not like 100%, but I rarely, I just rarely buy any chicken or pork because these animals are tortured their entire lives. I feel good about buying beef from 100% grass-fed operation out of Springfield, Kentucky. And I don't feel bad about buying beef that is conventionally raised, even though it's problematic environmentally. But it's not, the animal welfare is not horrendous as it is with chicken and pork. Anyway, he says the world needs to grow a lot more food, and factory farms, like other factories, are skilled at mass production. This guy has no imagination whatsoever, and I think he's going to bat for the big players. He's trying to, I'm just speculating, but I'm saying I think he is preserving the factory, obviously, explicitly, he's preserving the factory farming system. Let's read through this. Iowa now has more than 7 pigs for every human resident, and there's no obvious way for its factory farms to make meat for giant conglomerates like Hormel, McDonald's, should dispose of more than 50 million tons of manure a year. But it's striking that as a society, we've implicitly decided it happens however they want it to. A feedlot cow can unload 100 pounds of manure a day, and unlike fracking water, nuclear waste, and municipal sewage, nobody's really responsible for making sure it doesn't contaminate nature. A single CAFO can produce more waste than a major city. So he's saying that he's saying that we just need to regulate these things. And I think he's not getting at the root of the problem, not really taking advantage of what a freer market can do. I don't buy, show me a free market. There's no such thing as a free market. But if government has a a legitimate function, one of them is to regulate markets so as to preserve competition, so that consumer choice is a powerful force. Now let's read over the last slide, which is this is a repeat of what I said at first. The problem is pollution. His solution, this author's solution, is regulation. I think the problem with his solution is that it leaves in place this system that is bad for animal welfare. It's bad for water pollution. He didn't say a word that I saw, didn't say anything about the monopolies, that these big meat packers are monopolies. He didn't say anything about major meat packers are foreign owned, owned by Brazilians or by Chinese, which, I can, it's not necessarily that they're owned by billionaires or that they're owned by foreign billionaires. It's that they're owned by billionaires who have a chance to buy influence. So, and I'm saying here, item number 5, that the real solution is freedom. The real solution is food sovereignty. The real solution is the Prime Act or something similar to the Prime Act, which returns freedom of choice to we, the people. There's no reason, whatever state you're in, I'm in Kentucky, there's no reason the state of Kentucky cannot adequately regulate food and health issues. There's no reason for the federal government to have a monopoly on food regulation. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you for joining me.